Quite simple to understand. Yes, book is easy to read. Done. Started. Okay. So as I said, daily 1 hour for you will be more than enough for ethics, as anyhow subconsciously your orientation will be moving towards prelims. So you don't have to worry about ethics a lot. You'll definitely cover it slowly, right? But again, as I said, don't try not to do all the hyperactive work by focusing on answer writing case studies. So don't do all those things. Keep it very simple. Part A first, only then case studies. Unless and until you understand what is part A, it's wastage of time for writing case studies. And application of ethics is a daily thing rather than a one-time approach. Okay. So we'll try to look at the headings of last 3 days. So are there any important articles or not? GST Council article is covered in editorial. We will look at that particular thing. Yes. Omicron is on the rise. So some states have already gone for the same typical approach of lockdowns, night curfews. I don't understand the logic of night curfews. Do you think they are effective? Night curfews? No? Have any one of you read any Sahitya Akademi books? Any book which is awarded Sahitya Akademi? No? The beauty of Indian culture is there is a lot of knowledge in vernacular languages. There are a lot of good books in vernacular medium, but unfortunately, most of us see, even if I read Hindi, let's say, even if I can learn Hindi, I cannot learn Marathi, I cannot learn Kannada, Tamil. So there are a lot of vernacular books. So the only way is to read English translated books. So that has to be done on more proactive basis, so that we will read the best and brilliant things of vernacular medium as well. So if you see Russia is Russian, the books written in Russian is translated into English. So Leo Tolstoy works, or the works of Dostoevsky, all these things are actually written in Russian, but they become classics in English also. So we had probably such great books in our vernacular medium also. We have to translate them into English. Only then we will see the beauty of Indian culture and Indian thought process. The best example is Parva. Parva is a very good example of how a Kannada-based book is having a lot of insights into Mahabharata. Recently, one of your seniors also suggested a book called as Vachana Bharata. Vachana Bharata is also very famous in Karnataka, it seems. So now that translation into English has increased, which is a good thing, right? Don't you think so? Any famous vernacular books you have read? Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam? No? Avarna. Bhairap again. No Telugu books?
There's a book called Caravan, sir, in English.
Caravan.
That
Yeah.
is also a
By
I
that.
read the Kannada version.
Okay.
Sir, I don't know if this can be considered. I read Pakur Ralu, sir.
Pakutrallu. Okay. Which I have never heard. Which is?
It won Sahitya Akademi Award.
Okay. Nice. Yeah.
It talks about women's life in a film industry.
Okay. Yes. So I have never heard about it. I will try to add it to book list. Okay. Do read such books because they are very really interesting. Vernacular medium is always fun. It adds more diversity rather than a unified view. See, we are the generation of Doordarshan Mahabharata, right? We only know the one version of Mahabharata. There is a lot in Mahabharata to learn and understand. An unfortunate ideological shift in the judiciary. So this article is about a recent speech about Indianization of our legal system. Indianization of our legal system. Indianization of our mind. So this is one of those larger themes that is running in the country, the nostalgia, right? So Indians were great. India is a glorious land. We lost it. Every generation believes that the ancient times were the best. Now are polluted times. So you must have heard your grandfather saying that. Yes, you will be saying that to next generations. I will be saying that to next generation. For example, within UPSC journey, I believe our generation had a better preparation rather than the present generation, which is totally dependent on spoon feeding. Okay, so like this, we have this nostalgia or glorifying the past. Why do we glorify the past? You must have heard your teachers, right? Your seniors were better. This batch is first batch of all the batches I have taught. Every batch they feel the same. So why do they think so? Are you really that bad? Did every generation get really that bad, or is it same for every batch, but it's the perception of the teacher?
So from the Hindu culture and tradition point of view, there is a say that in Kali Yuga, as the time passes, the path keeps on increasing. So the previous time is good than the present time, and so that's how.
So Dwapara Yuga and all are much better than Kali Yuga. So that's the basic underlying value system. Okay. Even in Bhagavata or in Bhagavad Gita, also Krishna says the same thing, that we will be a rasaless, juiceless society. That means everything will lose its saramsa. Slowly as time passes, everything will be like hollow, empty. The food we eat, the humans, the ideology, everything will become hollow. So it's not something that, we don't have a dharmic justification. We do know, but now why? What is the other reason?
Technology one.
Technology.
Like I don't like when I see the kids these days, I feel that they don't play enough like how we played out. Their childhood is not as good as how ours was. So this is the only thing I can comment. And I feel because of the technology, they're too addicted.
But their comfort levels have increased fantastically, right? Now most kids are born into a touch screen world, or they have better access. They start day one on a car or something, right? So your parents probably worked very hard to provide you a lot of benefits. Now this generation is reaping all those benefits. The parents are overcompensating for the lack of love and time, right? So probably until your generation's parents had a lot of time and love and affection, so they don't have to overcompensate. Now the parents are not having enough time for the kids, so that they overcompensate it through comfort. Okay, so that's one thought process. That's not the theory, just a thought process.
Another thing is people love status quo.
People love status quo. Okay. So actually, see, your understanding is very nice. People love status quo. I don't want to change things. I don't want change to get bad. Okay, but also I don't like the existing time, right? I think the past was glorious. We should go back to the roots.
Yes, sir. They're so clinged to attached to status quo that they're still in the past only.
Imagine the past, right? In a glorified past.
No, sir.
The same line I feel is that versus bounded rationality.
They think whatever was then there is the best thing. Bounded rationality. Okay. So this Indianization is not only happening in judiciary, right? It's a thought process that has streamlined into every major field of discussion, right? Everywhere we see, even when we discuss about Oppenheimer atomic bomb, we do discuss Bhagavad Gita, right? I mean, every dimension, whether space or law, dharma, way of life, everything has a justification. Our Indians used to be great. Okay, now we have to go back into that particular thought process. Now, if you see particular statements from this particular article, we cannot discount entire Ardhashastra for one line. That is also a very wrong way to view what Ardhashastra. So Ardhashastra definitely says something like, if a male employee is talking to a female employee alone, okay, we have to be punished, or you have to punish that particular person, or some certain books have a misogynistic themes, or one or two lines like this. If you sit, a corrupt judge and a murderer of a Brahmin, so Brahmin has been put on a higher pedestal. Okay, so just because of few lines, we cannot discount the entire book or the treatise itself. And also, we should not look at those things from 2021 goggles.
Yes.
That is also one more thing. See, if you look at the traditional ancient disclosures or stories through 2021 feministic lens, for example, you'll find a lot of patriarchy, like tons and tons of it. That does not mean at that time they were so smart enough to understand that, or probably they have introduced all those things exactly because they understood patriarchy. See, if I understand patriarchy well, only then I will make it into a custom or something, right? I will protect my own self. So I have to be extra smart to notice how to incorporate all these things so that people will think it as a culture and value system rather than patriarchy. Yeah. So again, the point here is indigenization in right tone for the right reasons may actually help this country. There is a lot of wisdom in the ancient treaties. Like for example, Chinese celebrate their ancient hereditary and all those things. But the problem is, who is to decide what is good, what is bad? What is bad? If I go back to indigenization of everything, okay, I definitely know there are a lot of wonderful things in ancient Indian wisdom. There is no doubt about it. But am I bringing in the right essence, or am I going with the flow? If you open the door once, okay, patriarchal exercises might be brought back, okay, or hating the other might increase, or I open the doors to bring the good things, but that will be utilized by these political masters to gain more votes. That can also happen, right? You understand the logic what I'm trying to say? If I reopen the Indian discussion, yes, Indians were great. Indians had a lot of wisdom. I want to bring that wisdom into 2021 India. So new plus old is better India. That can be my thought process. I'm opening that door or discussion for a good reason. Okay. The same door can be used by someone else to reinforce his fault line views, prejudices, stereotypes, hate, and he will use those arguments to reinforce the subtle hate. So temporarily he is getting the benefit at the cost of, in the name of Indianness. You understand, right? So the judge will tomorrow go away. He won't have anything to do with the judiciary, but the entire judiciary will get a bad name. The judges are biased towards certain ideological associations. So tomorrow, if a judge gives positive judgment also, he will be looked in the framework of biased towards an ideology. So that will destroy the entire system. And humans are prone to make mistakes. We are all humans, right? We have emotions. No institute, no amount of learning, extra mechanisms, laws, regulation, constitutional values can protect us unless we ourselves are very strong. No matter what, I have to give justice to 2021 Indians or 2022 Indians rather than some imagined past. So that corruption of moral thought process should not happen. That is the most important thing we need to discuss. Have you seen any Indianization discussions recently? In international relations also, there are few articles which says Arthashastra should be brought back.
Yes, sir.
Yes, foreign policy should be viewed from the prism of Arthashastra. So like these discussions are going on. So that's something that even External Affairs Minister Jaishankar is promoting. Anything else? And that's not a wrong thing. As I said, there is a lot of wisdom in it. You can bring the good things. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Okay.
And so when he talks that India is a flatbed of democracy, he says
Mother of democracy argument. Okay.
He speaks about Buddha Sanghas, which are republics.
Okay.
So in the same line, I felt that when Bal Gangadhar Tilak also tried to bring these festivals, Shivali festivals, in the national movement, the another bad product was that we alienated Muslims
Uh-huh.
from our nation.
That is bounded rationality. I did something assuming society is good. Any other indigenization thought process?
What Tilak can we talk?
No, definitely it's trying to revive the ancient festivals, right? The Ganesh festival and all those things which promotes unity.
Even when we were discussing governance, even in governance
also, okay. Prime Minister also spoke about that Uttramur inscription.
Yes, sir.
The Tamil Nadu village.
Yes, sir. And
governance, Arthashastra again can be brought in.
Recently, Center for Ancient Knowledge Systems was opened in UP or Uttarakhand recently.
Okay. Ayush. Ayush has a lot of wisdom. Ancient medicine has a lot of, Ayurveda, alternative medicines have a good amount of knowledge to be explored.
Even in judiciary also, Chief Justice N.V. Ramana also have been very vocally talking that still justice is far from the common man. It is one element of it is the complex jargon we use, the complex filing we use. So this is all part of colonial legacy. So this is something has to be looked at so that if we Indianize that system according to our needs, then it would be better.
Okay, good. Education system, national education policy. National education policy 2020 also talks about a lot of value system that is there in the Indian ethos. So that value system has to be brought again and re-educate, right? So that is one thing.
So it says that the little children should be taught the stories of
Panchatantra, Jataka tales. Yes. So all those things will imbibe ethical values. That is also Indianization. We can bring, see, that is what, the more we explore, the more thoughts we get there. There are a lot of wonderful things. For example, mental health, business management, Krishna in business management, or Bhagavad Gita in business management. Nowadays, all these discussions have increased, right? To bring all the ancient wisdom and mix it with new thought process. Okay, in education, in warfare.
Also in a state, I don't remember the state, but Vedic maths was made.
Vedic maths in education. Again, education, right? Vedic maths, education, abacus basically can be used. Vedic maths is a very powerful way to, create that curiosity in the children. Anything else? See, vernacularization is different from Indianization. Indianization is bringing the Indian ethos into modern day culinary food habits, and all these things are also going back to ancient times. So lifestyle diseases and all these things are coming because of the unchecked usage of fast food culture. Yes, so we have to go back to our traditional thought process.
So
farming.
Can you sum up like this, sir? When we open the doors, there should be a semi-permeable membrane that will allow water.
Who will put that there? That is
rather than
I have seen a post. I don't know. I haven't read it. There was a post which actually tried to justify sati. Okay, so I didn't have the courage to open that post and read it. Okay, but there was a person who put it on a public website saying, why sati is justified. Okay, so maybe he is, as someone was saying, in his mind, bounded rationality. He's thinking that it is a rational thing. Okay, so maybe it's totally fine for him. I am probably prejudging. I haven't read the article. I don't know what he wrote. Okay, but that process is, it's okay. I mean, if I have to, as I forgot that law, it's the law which says that connecting the dots backward is always rational. As Steve Jobs says in the valedictory speech, connecting the hindsight is 20/20, right? Everybody can go back and connect all the dots. I can justify anything in the past using something. If I decide to justify Godse killing Gandhi, okay, no person in the earth can stop me from doing that. and it's rational, and it is within my freedom of speech and expression. I can justify the Nazi Holocaust. Yes, I can justify even the COVID, saying that, you know, God is punishing the humans for our own flaws, or the too much population has increased. So I can justify anything for any number of reasons. At the same time, I can use the past for productive purposes. Okay.
Rather than the discussion of who should do it, can we decide what should be the basis for
again what, who will decide that? See, the top layer, that means I appear to, you know, bring back Indianization for the welfare of India. Okay, while the cover poster is that, okay, I can use that for political electoral manipulations, right? Very subtly. There is a very famous lawyer which exactly does this, right? The cover is, you know, I bring welfare of India. I want India to grow. There is nobody can deny that much rational argument. Okay. Any person with common sense will say, if there is wisdom in ancient India, it has to be brought and applied to 21st world. For example, yoga. Yes or no? Prevention is better than cure. Why do we have non-communicable diseases? Because we are the country which created yoga, meditation, and all these things. We are not exploring the advantages. Somebody else is taking. If you go to Western countries, it's a revolution, right? Yoga is a mass movement. A lot of people practice yoga. They're working on fitness levels. Right? So all these things are happening because of yoga. We forgot Surya Namaskara. We forgot all those things. Okay. If I bring that for the welfare of all Indians, the health of all Indians, as long as I do that, it's totally fine. But while I do the 20% good things, I also bring a lot of stuff to justify the present day hate, so that I can also get votes. So that delicate balance has to be observed very, very nicely. Observe the words, slow down the videos, pause it under 0.5x speed, 0.1x speed. Notice each and every word they use. Okay, they have a very, very subtle manipulation on how to use the 20% good to do the 80% electronic engineering. Okay, so that's very nicely happening in this country, and unfortunately we don't have the time to observe all these things because we have a lot of articles to cover also. Okay, so don't worry about Indian judiciary. At least till 2022, I think Indian judiciary is in good hands under Ramana and Justice Chandrachud. After that, we will worry. Say still, 2024. This year, I think Ramana will retire in October or something. Till 24, Chandrachud will be there. Later on, what will happen? What will happen? System will go on. System won't stop for anyone, right? Whether good, bad, broken, or unlimping, system will keep on moving further. Okay.
But this indigenization, it would come under GS.
Definitely. Culture also. Ethics. Conflict of interest. Neutrality. Probity. Integrity. For example, if a sitting judge is saying, the prime minister is a versatile genius. Okay, so as pointed out in this particular article, right? So even if he gives a neutral judgment, let's say he has a very strong mind, he loves prime minister like crazily, but when it comes to his job, he is 100% dedicated. So if such a person makes an open-ended statement, then gives a 100% rational judgment also, I will look at the judgment from a political lens. That creates a lot of damage, not for the judge, but for the institution. Yes, Arun Mishra, when he retired, he was given the job as a NHRC chairman. Okay, being a National Human Rights Commission chairman, he makes a statement saying human rights are not so important when it comes to national security. NHRC chairman saying national security is important for than human rights. Okay, so all such statements, I think that was a statement he made, something like that in those lines. I may be wrong, but you get the idea, right? Ranjan Gogoi being a Rajya Sabha member, so that clearly brings a tone that somewhere in judiciary there is a ideological tilt. We cannot call everybody in the same paint. We should not brush everybody in the same paint. We have to be very, very careful in criticizing the individual only with empirical data. Okay. So again, don't discount one thing for every one line. Right? There might be good in everything. Take only the good, throw away the bad. That is the summary. Yes. China, our neighbor in the east, one of the largest neighbors, the largest neighbor technically, right? China is the largest neighbor. What is the problem between India and China right now? China has renamed 15 places of Arunachal Pradesh as Indian names. So Twitter users reacted by naming 15 Chinese places with Indian names. So the thing is, none of these are official from Indian point of view. That means Indian government does not recognize anything done by China, whereas China thinks by renaming the borders, by renaming the villages, it is claiming a lot of territory in Arunachal Pradesh. And also it is trying to legitimize its attack on Galwan Valley, and at least in international disclosure. Okay, now why or what should be the India's reaction? As Sindhu points out, we want to restore the status quo before May 2020 or April 2020. Before Galwan incident, whatever was the status quo in the borders, that should be brought back. For that to be brought back, both India and China should be on the same page. But it appears like China is in no mood to continue the discussion. So be very clear in remembering this. The border problem with China is not a geographical problem, it's a political problem. The border problem with China is not a geographical problem, it's purely a political problem. Why geography? Because if it is only about geography, we would have used the best of the satellites, military technology, drones, everything, and finalized the solution long ago. Investment was not a problem either for China or India. Money is not a problem. But what is the problem? The problem is China does not want to solve this particular issue so that it can keep India on the toes. So that continuation of that, pressure tactic, whereas as long as the border is not settled, I can keep putting the pressure on you so that your energies will be spent on the 2.5 front war. You will be worried about the 2.5 front war, whereas I can keep on continuing the discussion with a lot of countries. China shares a border with a lot of countries. It has technically solved issues with a lot of countries. So it is capable of solving the border issue if it is in favor of China. Right now, it is not in the favor of China. So what Indian government is doing technically is very correct. We should persuade Atmanirbhar Bharat. So we should be actually thankful to China that as long as China keeps pressure on the border issues like this, keep poking us, we will be reminded time and again that we have to go for Atmanirbhar Bharat. We have to have diversification supply chains. And it will also keep that Indian government on motivated zone where it will attract investments from a lot of countries like PLI, FDI, reforms. Okay. At the same time, we have to keep the negotiations open with China. China is still one of the largest trading partner of the country in spite of all these activities. So money is money, Atmanirbhar Bharat is Atmanirbhar, and border talks are continue. All the three things should go simultaneously. That delicate balance has to be always there. So, yes or no? If we don't have China, what will we do? We will again move back into complacency mode. Make in India, just like Make in India, we will announce a scheme and then relax. Now what are we doing?
Implementing it in letter and spirit.
Implementing it in letter and spirit. And yeah, right. Reclaiming temples and all those things is also a political ideology. Genuinely, if there is a case through legal means, if you are getting back everything, there is no harm in getting back anything and everything. At the same time, the top echelons are silent. It's the influence who will shout. It's the influencers who will create a tone, and the people who actually suffer are people at the grassroots level. Yes or no? People at the grassroots level are the ones who are actually polarized, not the top leaders, because top leaders clearly know the distinction between political campaign and actually believing whatever they are saying. They cannot survive if they believe actually everything they say, right? So it's the lower cadres that will always suffer. And these people also don't have any work, right? So, the Haridwar case, the hate speech have increased in recent times. Again, remember, we will discuss about hate speech, but just for idea's sake, remember, circumstances make a man. Sorry, circumstances do not make a man. They reveal him to himself. So hate is not something that BJP has invented. Or hate is not something that arises only from Hindutva. Hate comes from all religions equally at all times. The only thing is it is not magnified in the proportions. I'm not justifying the Hindutva hate. I'm saying all religions carry hate all the time. Okay, it's only a matter of time when and how you see it. Okay, so the thing is, one person is enough to create that cycle. There is one bigoted Muslim or Christian, let's say so, hypothetically. Okay, he will do some activity, and that one person is enough for me to blame the entire community, right? Because of him, I got an opportunity to hate the entire community. That will create a hate cycle. So I will find 10 others. So that cycle is continuing because of the help of all the bigoted people. So bigoted people in all religions are helping to continue this cycle going on. It's not only about one religion or one particular person. The most visible people are the majority. The most visible obvious result is majority. Yes or no? Think about it. But can I hate someone if there is no opposition party to hate? I mean, if I react in anger, if they respond back in love, I cannot keep on hating them. Yes or no? But that is not happening because it's a structural flaw. Hate is there in every religion, every place, every aspect, and that is not being done only for religious beliefs or faith. It is done for monetary benefits. It is done for vote bank politics. It is done for lot of wealth. Yes. So money is a big motivator for all the hate-related propaganda. So they went to Supreme Court saying this, and liberals have recently written a letter to President and Prime Minister saying that hate speech should be condemned severely, because in Haridwar they were discussing about genocide, ethnic cleansing, and they also even threatened the government that if they stop them, 1857 like a revolt will happen. Somebody should tell the history, right? The 1857 revolt is a failure or success? In comparison to government, who won? Government won or rebels won? Government whitewashed them, right? It literally wiped out all the rebels. Yes. Unfortunately. Because why did Indians lose? There is no unity. There is no common cause. There is no common leadership. There is lack of communication. There is lack of training. So on and so forth. Okay. So all of you remember Competition Commission of India? When did we discuss Competition Commission of India?
Reliance, Amazon,
Future. Amazon and Future deal. So here also there is an issue with payment system in Apple. So Apple and Google have their own payment system either through Play Store or App Store. So they don't allow other third parties to be utilize third parties for collection of the funds. So that is a problem. Why? Apple argues that I developed Mac OS, I maintain certain standards. So if I give up, that freedom for anyone to create their own app with subpar standards, that will affect the entire ecosystem. Why do I pay 1.5 lakh for an iPhone? Why do people pay so much amount of money for iPhone?
That ecosystem.
The entire ecosystem, right? Both hardware and software. I don't pay money only for hardware, right? I pay money for both. By the way, this is not iPhone, but I pay money for both hardware and software. Why? The optimization. For example, have you ever seen, just imagine your battery is 10%, about to sleep. You're about to sleep, battery is 10%. You slept, and in the morning when you wake up, Android probably it will be 2 or 3%. Yes, Android guzzles a lot of battery. If your phone is a Chinese phone or a low-end phone, it guzzles even more battery. That means optimization of the apps is not up to the mark. But in the iPhone, if you sleep with 10% battery, probably it will end up at 8 or 9% also. Hardly any battery is drained. Why? The macro operating system and each and every app, okay, talk to each other in a perfect fashion. That this is a hibernation time, you have to rest. There is no background activity. So Apple invests a lot in maintaining that kind of standards. So that is why people pay such huge amount of money for Apple. We don't have antivirus issues in Apple Mac, right? And people who uses Apple, they have this entire ecosystem, watch, TV, home system, everything is synchronized. They are like one extended hardware and software. So they pay money for that. Okay. But in Android, it's free, open source, and it is flexible. I can create my own version of OS with the 10,000 bucks and still release it into the market. Yes or no? So that is why Apple is charging you the premium. This is at least the argument from Apple's side. So to maintain that quality, I need that discretion. I need to maintain that entire standards. Only when I maintain such stringent grip, I can maintain such ecosystem. If I loosen it up, what will happen? There won't be any difference between Apple and any other. Yes, just think about it. Why will you pay 1.5 lakh and people buy like crazy? Yes or no? People buy Apple products like crazy. Why? They are rich. Okay. They're richer. Quality, right? Just think about the iPad. Okay. There is nothing even closer to an Apple iPad and a pencil. Not even remotely close. So that is the quality that is Apple is providing. Not the entire market. You can go and search, but there is no single app or even the apps are very good in iPad. That kind of flexibility comes only through quality maintenance. So that is why Competition Commission of India is filing the case. It is happening internationally also, but you should know all sides of story, not only from government point of view. So that is the first article, I guess. Sunday. China border article, hate article, we'll see. We are exchanging sweets with Chinese troops and Pakistan troops. What does that say? India soft power. We are making friends with the Chinese and the Pakistanis. We don't have animosity. We celebrate everything. India is also gifting a lot of Covaxin to Afghanistan. This is again one more example for vaccine Maitri and soft power. There is a concept called as neighborhood first policy. When was it introduced? Okay. Sure. Kirtana? No idea. Neighborhood first policy. IR done? Attended? What is neighborhood first policy? Who will tell me what is neighborhood first policy?
Simply put, in Atal Bihari Vajpayee's words, you can change friends but not neighbors. So friendship with neighbors is inevitable, is the underlying background behind announcing this neighborhood first policy.
Okay.
Also, one of the objectives is to grow as a regional leader. When we have, if we see the problems like if we minus the disputes with Pakistan and China, there is and if whatever we are investing in the name of national security, if that is invested in human capital, there is a lot of scope for India. So
we have to
putting
ignore the
neighborhood first.
issues with Pakistan, China, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar.
Sir.
We have to ignore the issues with Pakistan, China, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar.
No, sir. I'm handling the macro theme.
Okay.
Macro theme. Not
How many of you have attended IR classes? Very good. What is neighborhood first policy? Except Sumant.
Giving priority to neighborhood countries.
Giving priority to neighborhood countries first. Okay. When did this policy evolve, or what is the backdrop of this policy? Is it a new innovative policy? Okay.
IK Gujarat also implemented such policies.
It is called as?
Gujarat Doctrine.
So what is the Gujarat Doctrine?
Acting as a big brother to the fellow neighbors and giving them what they want without expecting anything in return.
Okay, so I did tell you multiple times, right? When we use the term big brother, we use it in a negative connotation rather than in a positive connotation in UPSC. So we should not be a big brother. That is a core thing. See, neighborhood first policy is a doctrine which is continuation of the lineage of Gujarat Doctrine or Panchsheel. Panchsheel, Gujarat Doctrine, continuation of Gujarat Doctrine by both Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh. Then neighborhood first policy. In 2014, when Modi became Prime Minister, he invited all the SAARC leaders to attend the ceremony, clearly saying that, you know, India's neighborhood plus Maldives. India's immediate neighborhood plus Maldives are the top priority, because if we don't control our own neighborhood, then we don't have force multiplier. If we control our neighborhood, we have a force multiplier. So that is continuation of Gujarat Doctrine. And the most important thing in Gujarat Doctrine is non-reciprocity. The most important thing is non-reciprocity. Non-reciprocity means we are not doing something for the favor of getting back things. We don't want to be a big brother. We don't want to help China. Sorry, we don't want to help Sri Lanka or Afghanistan for the sake of any benefits. We want to help them because we can help them. So that is non-reciprocity. So your Vaccine Maitri is an extension of neighborhood first policy. All those things will actually get India a lot of soft power back. Okay, SAARC satellite, Vaccine Maitri, quad vaccination, and all these things. And also India is considered as a net security provider, right? And a first responder. So these advantages are there because of the neighborhood first policy. So in Afghanistan also we are continuing the same thought process, that we are a provider, net security provider, and we are also providing hard HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Right? So that's a very good thing for India. So the Taliban are saying that we will provide security to the embassies if you reopen the embassies. So Vaccine Maitri should get us some good points within the Afghanistan Taliban cycle. So please focus on the basic details. For example, in prelims, you might find questions like how many states India share boundary with different countries, each and every country's issues, the distance between India and or India, Myanmar, Thailand, trilateral highway, Bibin. All these are extensions of neighborhood first policy. Again, as I said, mains is prelims is a subset of mains. So you have to work on a lot of value addition. So NGOs are suffering because of Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Okay, that is something that we will see how it will turn out. And GST also has slipped. This will affect fiscal federalism. This will affect fiscal federalism. GST compensation is supposed to be from what time to what time? Five years from the introduction. So if you know that GST was introduced in 2017, you will know that GST compensation is still 20 22. So government is saying EWS, economically weaker section reservation, is valid. The criteria that are applying is 8 lakhs. Why 8 lakhs? Their rationality is 8 lakhs is a good amount of money in present day world. So if you cross 8 lakh rupees in present day world, it will be good enough. But again, it exactly matches the creamy layer concept of OBCs. So till Indira Swane or till the EWS reservation, India followed only socially backward reservation system. For the first time, EWS has introduced economic backwardness in the reservation system. So Supreme Court has to uphold the EWS reservation quota system. Okay, that is point number 1. And economic criteria as a backwardness is for other sections of the society, not for the reserved societies, right? So 10% has been introduced and it is already being implemented in UPSC, NEET, other places. Now the government is justifying it by saying 8 lakhs is a good criteria. Supreme Court wanted to know how they came to that conclusion. Government is saying 8 lakhs is a rational criteria, not some ad hoc criteria. And technically speaking, Supreme Court cannot refuse that logic, right? Or there should be some proof to create a consensus that society, not many people are actually making 8 lakh rupees. Okay, the debate will go on. If we actually have empirical data, how many upper caste families in our general category families in India are making less than 8 lakh rupees? So if we come to a conclusion, actually 20% of the entire general category families are not even making 8 lakh rupees. Should we increase the EWS to 20? Reservations should be in proportion more or less with the population percentage. For example, SC/ST percentage is 7.5 and 16%, right? Same is with the population. I hope you know that much, right? So your population percentage decides the quota within reservation pool. So if tomorrow there is an empirical data which says that 25% of people in India are not even making 8 lakh rupees. So should we extend the EWS to 25? I mean, that's pure generalization, but you get the idea, right? So should we increase or decrease the ratio percentage of 10% based on what criteria? Conclusion that there are only 10% of the poor within the unreserved sections. So that is again something arbitrary. So we will see how Supreme Court justifies. So if 75% reservation is there, what will happen?
Unreserved becomes unemployed.
Unreserved becomes unemployed. Why? Still there is 25% chance. Okay. So without reading the article, how many of you will tell me the provisions or why this article is important? Without reading, just reading the headline. Raise your hand if you know. Yes. Why are we discussing this article? What is the act? Lavanya? What is the act? Which paper? The act we are discussing is Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. Okay. So this also comes under GS paper for applied ethics. There is a concept called as applied ethics. So abortion. Should we give the reproductive rights to women? Or should the state intervene and say when and how she should have a baby? Yes. Savita, I guess there was a famous case in Norway also, where because of religious beliefs, they did not allow her to get aborted. She passed away because of that particular incident. Then there is a reform in abortion laws. So abortion laws are a bone of contention between religion, laws, and ethics in a lot of countries. So that is a discussion, ongoing discussion in applied ethics. So if you see this particular article, a woman went to High Court to get her pregnancy terminated. Why? Because after 20 weeks in India, if you have to terminate your pregnancy, you have to take the help of a legal route. That is a doctor. If it is 24 weeks, 2 doctors, more than 24 weeks, only courts can give you that permission because of fetal abnormalities. There should be a very strong reason for you to get the abortion done, or else they won't give you the permission. It's illegal, it's crime. There are a lot of problems. So the Delhi High Court is discussing that reproductive choice is a reproductive right. It comes under her personal liberty, which is an extension of which article?
21.
Article 21, right to life. So she should have that choice. So here what will happen is the fetus has developed a lot of abnormalities. Even if the fetus is born, it will develop heart complications, respiratory complications. Throughout the life, the baby will suffer. Because of that, the mother will also suffer. So it's better to go for termination of pregnancy. So in applied ethics, the concept of consent comes into the picture because we cannot take the consent of the baby. Yes or no? But when does the life start? Yes, exactly right. But we cannot take the consent. Maybe that baby wants to be born even with all the faults, right? But I cannot wait for it to get a certain age. So there are a lot of complications in the applied ethics aspect also. So that is why Government of India has brought in this particular act known as Medical Termination Pregnancy Act. So as the article mentions, only when there is a grave injury to health or mental health of the woman, not only physical health but also mental health. Yes, because if the children is born with certain genetic disease, rare disease, it will affect the health of the mother also. Psychologically, she will be troubled. So Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act do not allow abortion beyond 24 weeks. So now it is 28 weeks. It's a very important repeat. You will see similar articles like High Court is giving permission for abortion and all those things, but it basically comes under applied ethics. Applied ethics. Who should have the consent? So should state decide when a woman should have the baby? Yes or no? In case of abnormalities. This national security policy cannot change Pakistan's direction. The other day I was mentioning Raja Mohan's article, right? Raja Mohan says that India-Pakistan relations will change because of geopolitical changes. So as General Bajwa says, Pakistan has to move away from geopolitics to geoeconomics. So that is the summary. So Vivek Kaju also writes the same article. At the same time, on the sacrilege blasphemy case, do you remember me discussing, about Salman Taseer, Punjab Governor Salman Taseer. So he went to the jail to meet that Hindu woman. So he was murdered by his own bodyguard. His name is Mumtaz Qadri. So Mumtaz Qadri, yes.
The
Pakistan case, exactly. So that paragraph says the same thing. The culture of Islamism is illustrated in veneration of Mumtaz Qadri. Mumtaz Qadri is a bodyguard who is supposed to protect the governor, Punjab governor. Pakistan also have a Punjab, right? That state's governor. So he was killed by his own bodyguard. Why? Because that governor name is Salman Taseer. He went to a jail to meet that Hindu woman who was accused of blasphemy. So the society understood that, or misunderstood him, saying that he is supporting a blasphemer. So that is why he has to be killed. Because Qadri killed him, Qadri is celebrated as a hero. Just imagine the amount of hate. Right? Hesitations of history, that is the term used by Prime Minister Modi. Hesitations of history are legacy issues or historical baggages. Pakistan's ideology and mindset prevents it from developing a realistic ties with India. It also has an impact on socio-economic development. The same can be not said about Bangladesh. If you see Bangladesh, though having hate and all these things, Bangladesh still invested in social development. The results are visible for everybody to see. While Pakistan is sinking, Bangladesh is rising. So any country which invests in hate and bigotry won't succeed. So not only India can learn from them, India can also learn from Pakistan how not to become, as some people put it, Hindu Pakistan. Right? So China can help. We have also discussed this. China will give certain amount of money to Pakistan as a China-Pakistan economic corridor, but China uses Pakistan as a colony rather than a state. So if Pakistan is really interested to grow, what is the best way forward? To solve ties with India. All this may be of some help, but cannot be integrated with a large country, that is India. If Pakistan is genuinely willing to change, India will be more than happy to help the Pakistan. So this can be used as a way forward. Pakistan people can neither have human security nor social successful economy without a cooperative ties with India. The sooner they realize that, the better for everyone. Whenever money ties develop, automatically P2P, B2B, G2G ties will improve, and the spillover effects will create a conducive environment for talk. The baggage of partition has to be understood and made sure that it is never repeated. Yes, as I say, all German kids are taken to Holocaust museums. Why? We need to know our past, not bury the past. We should not bury partition. We should make sure that all kids in India and Pakistan know the cost of partition, the cost of hate, the cost of communalism. We have to bring all those families which were wronged. Yes, rape was a common weapon, murder, burning of families. Yes, so that hate is the root cause of a lot of problems in the country. So all those families history have to be brought out. It has to be created into a documentary. Every school children in India, every school child in Pakistan should know that this is the cost of hate. Then that will create a long-lasting impact. If we bury the past, if we glorify the past, if we romanticize the past, or if we whitewash the past, what will happen? New narrations will always be created. Yes or no? So that has to be done in the right tone. Museum for partition. The same should be done for war memorials, wars, 1965, 71, Kargil, even Galwan. It has to be taught to all the school kids in the country. Yes, why? We need to understand the cost of war. War is not something that is easy, right? A lot of children will lose their parents forever. Yes, mothers will lose their sons. So hate is something that has to be fought with institutional tools rather than generalizations. Clear? Yes. Do you think such kind of peace is possible between India and Pakistan?
India is more than willing, but
Pakistan is not in a mood to change its thought process.
Sooner than later, it will realize.
2045, probably. State schemes can cast a lifeline to welfare plan. So this article is written by Odisha minister, right?
MP, sir.
MP from Odisha. So obviously he will have some
bias towards Odisha.
Bias towards state policies. Yes, but he's okay, empirically okay, good. His suggestions are not that filled with political colors. His suggestions are rational to an extent. The most important thing is Pradhan Mantri Vandana Yojana. Matru Vandana Yojana is for reducing maternal mortality rate, and also to break that vicious cycle of mother-child health issues. Yes or no? Healthy mothers will lead to healthy society. So that is an investment in social capital, human capital. So he says Pradhan Mantri Vatru Vandana Yojana is fine, but the budget is also fine, but the impact is not so great. As I have highlighted in the red color, exclusion error is very high. 50% of the mothers are not even coming under the particular scheme. Yes, and also he says all the beneficiaries within the 50% who are getting the benefits, within them 50% are not getting all the benefits. So the scheme implementation is flawed. Okay, so as the other day we have seen, fundamental rights are the reason why we have governance. So not delivering the schemes is a failure of governance system. And he also argues that the money given to the woman is to act as a compensation for the
income
wage lost. Yes, a daily laborer is there, she is pregnant, she cannot go to work in the last 3 months. Okay, actually people go to work till 7th or 8th month also. They lift heavy weights even in 8th month, right? So just 2 months they don't work, even that is a huge amount of revenue loss for them. So that is compensated by the state. So he argues that the compensation should be further increased. So if you have to help the woman in totality, you have to invest a lot. Okay. He cites certain examples like out-of-pocket expenditure is very high, wage compensation is very low. Not only that, the further complications or further nutritional security and all those things also need some kind of support. So to tackle the problem, what is the best way forward?
Minimizing exclusion errors first.
Governance is a journey rather than a destination. The most important thing is political will. Right? Even the existing schemes will create a long-term impact if they are implemented in letter and spirit. So first of all, assume 5,000 rupees is being given to women in 3 installments, 2-1 or 1-2, whatever the ratio is. Let's say 6,000, 2-2. Okay, we have to make sure that 2 + 2 + 2 is reached in a timely fashion. Automated delivery systems has to be there, and Aadhaar is anyhow used, and Supreme Court blessings are there. Wherever subsidies or government beneficiaries are there, Aadhaar can be used. So we have to create some app, a long-term solution where because of Aadhaar, automatically people will get the benefits. Yes or no? So that's a very, very important thing. And presently the scheme restricts it to only one alive child or one live child. So he says that it has to be extended to 2 kids. So that system will be able to help a lot of women. Exclusion errors have to be reduced, but that can be done at the grassroots level. So all this is happening, all this will happen only when we know that there is a problem. Someone sitting in Delhi implementing the scheme will assume I have created a wonderful scheme and it will be implemented through Aadhaar. So just imagine, Aadhaar is there, beneficiary is there. What will go wrong? At least in theory, that is how we think, right? If I have Aadhaar and bank account and a government scheme, done. Automatically everything will be automated. But still, it is not being perfected at the grassroots level. So cooperative federalism should work there. Grassroots level, the states and center should work together. Probably they should sit and work for one time. Standardized COVID-like portal. Perfected. When you perfect an app at the grassroots levels, also names, exclusionary errors, all these things will be gone. So I think it will happen sooner than later because people are realizing that there are a lot of exclusionary errors in using Aadhaar also. Till now Aadhaar was not there, now we have Aadhaar. Now who will tell me what is inverted duty structure? This red one underline. WTO time, you must have heard the term inverted duty structure. No? This is triangle, right? What is inverted triangle? Reverse. So what is the problem? Normally our mind is base should be bigger, top should be smaller. Okay. So if the final product is cheaper than the raw materials, that is when we call it as inverted duty structure. The sum is costlier than the whole. You get the idea? That means if I have to create a cotton shirt, okay, cotton shirt is charged at 5 rupees or 5%, whereas the raw cotton is charged at 18%. The threads are charged at 12%. So individually, it is more costly than the overall product. So that won't incentivize Indians to go for creating an entire shirt. Yes or no? If the raw material is cheaper, automatically I will buy more raw material and I will convert into some final product. Okay. But if raw material is costly than the final product, I will want to buy from some imported source or a manufactured source. Clear? So raw material should be cheap or they should be at the same price. If the raw material is charged at 12%, shirt is charged at 12%, probably I will have an incentive. If the raw material is charged at 12%, if the shirt is charged at 18%, I will definitely have more incentive to manufacture them in India. Yes or no? But what is happening right now? Opposite. As the next three lines say, GST of the fiber is 18%, whereas on yarn is 12%, but the final fabric is 5%. So that is called as inverted duty structure. So recently Nirmala Sitharaman wanted to take a decision, but on New Year Day, just before the New Year Day, they decided not to bring the GST changes. And inverted duty structure is there in a lot of departments, in a lot of products, which is disincentivizing a lot of manufacturing sector. So government is working or looking into this inverted duty structure. Okay. As a green line says, a ministerial group is already working on rationalizing inverted duty structures across products. You get the idea, right? The raw material should always be cheaper than the product.
Across products, in the sense, not only in the cotton textile industry,
different industries.
Iron, steel,
pharma, a lot of industries. See, actually, the problem is GST is supposed to solve all these issues. GST means one nation, one tax. Now, what is in reality? One nation, one product, one tax. If a water bottle is 12%, it is 12% throughout India. That is a good thing. Earlier 12% in Karnataka, 10% in Andhra, like that. No, now one product, one nation, one tax. But within that there are slabs. Before GST we had slabs. Now in GST I think there are 8 slabs. GST is supposed to be one nation, one tax. That means 12%. Universally, no matter what you buy, from aeroplane to matchbox, it is supposed to be charged at 12% uniformly. Worst case scenario, 2 things like basic goods 5%, rest all 12%. But unfortunately, what happened? 12, 5, 18, 28. Gold has different slab, right? Like this, there are 6 or 7, 8 slabs for different goods, and they are also not standardized. One day it will be 12, the next day it will be 18. So like this, it is altering. So the entire purpose of GST is what? To streamline the tax process, to make it as simple as possible. If just imagine any product you buy is charged at 12%. No complications whatsoever, right? 100 rupees, 12%, 1000 rupees, 12%, 10 rupees, 12%. Everything is charged at 12%. Taxing will be very easy. Products will be costly, cheaper, but they will balance out. But in reality, GST has become a roller coaster. You can say that more or less. It's going up and down. We have not concretized the GST system. So GST is supposed to bring a lot of advantages, but that advantages are not reaped in the economy because of this ups and downs.
So many slabs.
Very bad thing.
Progressive taxation.
No, progressive taxation is supposed to be there for income tax, not for GST, because indirect taxes, the cost is borne more by the poor and marginalized sections of the society, right?
If I'm putting all the products under like either 5 or odd, right?
The spillover effects will be much higher. The cake will get bigger, economy will grow, and that money will flow back into the welfare.
Looking at from an political executive point of view, in order for me to implement so many, I need money. So
5, 12, 28 sin goods, smoking, alcohol, luxury items, throw them all under 28. So 3 slabs max. 5, 12 and 18, 28 max, right? Maximum 3. We can still rationalize most of the products under 3 categories, but we don't have the understanding. We still are struggling with the thing. The thing is, your argument is very correct. I need money so that I can keep on distributing. Okay. So for you to make money, system should be smooth. You let the system go smoothly first, then one day you'll make money. What you are trying to do is, I need to make money. It's like, while riding a bus, the bus got punctured. Okay. You did not stop the bus. The bus is going on. You are trying to change a tire while the bus is still on the road. Okay. Yes. You get the idea, right? It can be done technically. You can still change a bus tire while the bus is running, but it's like, Hollywood movie. Yes. So that is what Indian government is trying to do. You need to let the bus stop or, overhaul or something like that. No, I want both of them at the same time. COVID is extra. Yes or no? The Telugu idiom, Mulge nakam is a tatikaya, right? That means a fox is already suffering. On the head of the fox, a coconut will fall. Yes. In the same way, fiscal federalism is already suffering because of GST slabs. Then COVID is a bonus. Now we are changing the steering while driving. Okay. Yes. From selective to universal engagement, I personally believe that he needs supporting in MEA related job. So he wrote this article. Okay, so he says India has done a fantastic job under External Affairs Minister Jaishankar. Nobody can counter that, because he's a career bureaucrat turned politician. It's more like, lateral entry into politics. Okay, so he brought in a lot of favor and he has handled a lot of things fantastically. The case in point is China. With China, he made sure that at least the disengagement happened very peacefully. Good amount of time, but he has done it fantastically without giving a lot of, limelight. So politicians should also be supported, because if Modi supports him only, then Jaishankar would have done whatever he has done. So I think Prime Minister Modi's first term and second term, if you observe, the foreign policy is more clear because of Jaishankar. He is able to very smartly take his own domain. The only unhappy person probably will be Harsha Shingrala.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Lot of autonomy
to work. He's gone.
Autonomy is gone.
I think so, because see, if a external affairs minister is there, I will be the head of the bureaucracy. I will know how to get things done. Now the minister himself knows how to get the things done. So then I'm just a dummy head, right?
But no, sir.
You think about it.
No, okay, you're saying his,
he will be implementing whatever is told to him. Exactly, he won't have the full freedom to.
He won't exercise his
choice of autonomy, right?
But then still things are getting done.
It's two-way street. Yes, you have a minister who actually understands diplomacy. Yes, you have a minister who actually understands diplomacy. That is also a problem, right? Because when the minister does not know, it will be more easier for me to bring that new thought process. Okay, so coming back, has India dealt very nicely? If you see the world map, if you see the world map, from Arctic to Antarctic, from Latin America to New Zealand. We have literally covered almost all the countries. Yes, Indian foreign policy is very active in all the regions. We are increasing our influence in the West Asia. Look, West policy. Yes, Abraham Accords. If you see the Southeast Asian nations, we are increasing our domination, or we are increasing our influence. Central Asian countries, we have recently started re-engaging with them. Russia, we have good relations. China, negotiations are happening. With USA, the ties have strengthened. Israel, the ties have strengthened. So like this, we have literally covered a huge amount of domain. And that is purely because of the energy that this particular foreign affairs minister has brought in, supported by political masters, not limiting themselves to the hesitations of history, the dehyphenation of policy of Modi. For example, Israel-Palestine dehyphenation. Yes, that gives us a lot of weight in Western Asian diplomacy. So like this, he has covered a lot of points, and even in international institutions, like the recent UNSC resolution against climate change as a security threat, we were able to project our voice. COP26, UNSC reforms, the demand of UNSC reforms by Prime Minister Modi. So all those things are very nicely handled by India. There are no major, diplomatic backfires. So definitely this article is bringing out all the right points, but every point is a mains question. We'll try to just look at the highlighted points. So what is our present policy with USA? Our present policy with USA is we have enough freedom to strategic autonomy. That means I will buy whatever I want to buy from Russia or engage with China. At the same time, I will also use USA to benefit myself and help USA also. So quad vaccine or quad, emerging technologies, all these things are being implemented by USA and Indian collaboration. J is one more area where India and USA are collaborating. So the bilateral ties between India and USA is a heavy tilt. We can definitely say from 2000s to 2021, India and USA become very, very close friends. Signing of lot of bilateral agreements also guarantees the same thing. But the one headache that USA has gave us is Afghanistan. But even that we are very smartly managing with the help of
CARs.
Central Asian republics, or all the national security advisor, meet Russia, China. Okay. Next, climate change. Net zero emissions have been announced by India. CATSA also we have very nicely managed with USA by not getting any sanctions. We are using Central Asian republics again, Russia also. Then what did we do? Maritime security also we have Sagar, proactively engaging with blue economy, the Indo-Pacific region. AUKUS is a value addition to India's process. So all these things are helping India to become a self-reliant nation. So foreign policy is definitely playing a very positive role in India's foreign policy engagement. Recently, we went to Myanmar to talk to them. Yes, that is neighborhood first policy. We have fisherman issue with Sri Lanka, but that is also being dealt at a bilateral level. So all this signifies that Indian diplomacy is in a very good position. But we still have a lot of vacancies. Indian foreign policy needs a lot of diplomats. I think there is around 1,500 IFS vacancies in the country, foreign service officers. So all such people, a lot of young blood has to be filled in the foreign service so that we can proactively engage with a lot of countries. We don't have embassies in a lot of places. We only have attaches. So we should engage our diplomatic outreach. See, an ambassador is not only for diplomacy, right? He will bring business to India, or he will establish Indian presence in that particular country. So we need to spread our wings further and use our soft power nicely. For that, lot of energy has to be invested. So if more and more people are researching in foreign policy or spending time in diplomacy, automatically engagements will increase. So for that, because if you see Western countries, they'll spend huge amount of money in diplomacy, whereas India sends very limited personnel. So that has to increase. That is one underlying belly of Indian diplomacy that we don't discuss. Okay. The crypto assets conundrum, we are not going to discuss that. Okay. So Justice Ravindran panel, Pegasus Supreme Court tells people to report if they were targets. So if anyone suspects that they are a victim of Pegasus, they can go to that particular panel and say, I was a victim of Pegasus spying. What is the cost of Pegasus spying? I told you.
It's around 75 lakhs.
75 lakhs per individual. So only selected few Indians are privileged enough to be spied by Pegasus. Subsidized, we don't know. Right? Change in India-Pakistan relations again. Pakistan has violated the ceasefire agreement. So in February 2020, we achieved some miracle by going for ceasefire agreement, which is violated in the new year 2022. That is one thought process. Okay. Yes. Lack of sensitivity. House panel on marriage has only one woman MP. So what is the problem with that? They want to increase the marriage age for whom? Women. So who should discuss it at least? Women, right? At least 10% reservation should be there for women. I mean reservation in the sense at least 10% of the panel should, at least 20, 30, 40%. But out of all the 31 members, only one woman is there. That is not clearly helping the cause of the government, or lack of sincerity. Sensitivities have to be brought out. This is an example for patriarchy. Can we say that? Patriarchy or lack of sensitivity? Or what is there? All are MPs only, right? Why should women be there on women issues? Is there a necessity?
When they were decriminalizing Section 371, not necessarily who are there were not from the LGBTQ community. Does that mean that was not sensitive?
Okay. Technically, you can argue that.
So rather than talking on this simple micro theme, this reflects the participation of women in political spheres. This is just a symptom of women not participating. When these kind of sensitive issues come up, we need women legislators to actually give their voice, bring more empathy. For example, we were discussing back then, the other day, there were no ladies washrooms. Ladies washrooms. This is because glass seal, because there was glass ceiling there. So I think this is just a one symptom of
the normalized.
Yes.
Okay.
So the male MPs would not be able to empathize with the real on-ground problems of the women.
At the same time, they might 50-50, right? Anyhow, we have 14% of the women in parliament system, so it should not be a big deal to get 5 or 6 of them into the panel, right? So it will bring in the diversity. So at least for the sake of diversity, for an alternative counterpoint of view, we should, if not in every panel, at least for a panel which discusses their own issues. So in the same way, if there were actually LGBT members within the parliament, okay, if then they were not involved in the LGBT discussion, that would have been a problem. Yeah. So that is also one thought process that we have to think of. So Malabar exercise is a prelims question. Who are the major members of Malabar exercise? Malabar exercise is a continuation or extension of the quad system, right? Quadrilateral. All the 4 members of quad. Especially you have to remember in the context of Australia. Australia was not allowed to Malabar exercise until recently. Only last year did India invite Australia into Malabar exercises. So all such trivialities are your prelims question. I assume that you will read them.
Tibetan government in exile exists in India.
There is also a prime minister. There is also prime minister for that particular. He makes the statements on now and then. But again, I don't know. Is there any utility for that? Because after this present Dalai Lama, China already have its own Dalai Lama. So I'm not sure how long the influence will be there.
But if it is not important, why would China send this?
Sensitivity. China is sensitive, right? See, what will happen if this 80-year-old Dalai Lama is going to a Buddhist monastery in Arunachal Pradesh? The Prime Minister of India, Modi, wants to visit, a Tabang monastery in Arunachal Pradesh. What will happen? He's going into India only, right? But it thinks, it's a political message to the Tibetans that, it reminds them that still there is a connection between them and Dalai Lama or them and Buddhism. So the signification might be slowed down. So it thinks in that particular insecure way. China is very, very insecure when it comes to Tibet. So it's like Kashmir for them. So after 75 years also they still believe, or around 70 years also they still believe that Tibet is not totally theirs. There is still a scope that Tibet might try to go away from them, China. Because of that insecurity, they do all this.
Like their wound is still alive.
Yeah, technically, because they did not assimilate them, right? Assimilation comes through love and peace. Assimilation does not come through brute force. And in 1950, a lot of people are still alive. So kids who are at the age of 10 in 1950, probably 60 or 70-year-old now. So the memories are alive. So they will convey the same pain to their next generations. So just like the partition, the entire Tibetans who are in India are their relatives in their Tibet. Okay, they might act like Chinese, but they still have the wounds under the belly. So they have this cultural memory or collective memory. So that is not easy to wipe out. We can only wipe it out through assimilation, love, and compassion, not through brute force. Yes. So do read articles. They might help you. And find out the provisions of Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. It's a repeated article. It's a repeated theme. And whenever you see such articles, you should be able to recollect all the static part. If you cannot recollect what is Gujral Doctrine, or at least what is the major theme of Gujral Doctrine, what will you write? If prelims questions comes, they will give you A, B, C, D. Which of this is not a principle of Panchashili? Then headache. Lack of sleep. New Year party. Then exam studies, late night study. Till 3 a.m. you are reading, then you slept. Yes or no? Yes.
Sir, going back to the first article we discussed today, that Indianization. When we say only we have to take good only from that, aren't we?
At least that should be the underlying premise.
Yes, sir. But that can only, I would say that is idealism rather than realism. Because if we take the example of leaders meeting at COP26, these people go in their private jets, only that particular leader of the country and their staff, and they'll just to save the future, they're emitting a lot of carbon.
They could have done through Skype also.
Yes, sir. I mean, what I wanted to say is, any act we do, we cannot
totally cut it off.
We cannot totally cut off the negative minuses that emanate from them. So So thinking in that way, I say, are we being too idealistic rather than being realistic? The realist, I mean, I don't say that we have to legitimize everyone. Like, yes, we can say, yes, politicians, whatever, are doing the. I mean, they are using their ancient knowledge systems of political gains is not. No, it is totally wrong. By realism, I don't say it is. I'm not justifying it, but expecting that it would come and taking measures adequately will fetch in long run rather than sticking to this idealistic things of taking only good. So is what I think.
Again, as the saying goes, I totally understand your questions. Like, who will decide how to take good or what? Aren't we too, unrealistic that only good will come, right? My point is, true religion cannot be misused. Okay, in the same way, if you actually go to ancient wisdom, not perceived wisdom, okay, I genuinely believe only good will come out, because again, in 21st century, let's say you are an NRI, you're a software engineer, you went to USA, your kids are born and brought up in USA, okay, so you want to Indianize them. You will teach them Bhagavad Gita, or you will teach them Bhagavata, you will tell them Indian ethos. So it will teach them a lot of values, good things. Okay. Assume one or two patriarchal things or something have also been thought by you. Okay. Assuming one or two negative things also came out of because of this particular exercise. Okay. In 21st world, is it really possible for you to exactly implement the old values as they are?
No.
It breaks down, right? So in the same way, when I say good, okay, good can also be like blindly reproduced in 21st century also. So because of the globalized world, definitely things will change. For example, you get the concept, right? Kids have to take care of their parents. Someone sitting in America, buying an iPad for their parents and doing a video call daily and giving all the medicines or appointing someone to take care of them, still consider that he is doing a good job. Okay, but it's not same like you being here. So can I judge him? You have given up on Indian values. No, according to him, he's still caring for his parents, fine. Okay, but because of the circumstances at the grassroots level, he's not implementing it as it is. So realism will always play a role, even if we don't discuss that. Okay, but at least there should be some conscience on why I am reviving. But the problem is, majority, again, as I said, faith is a difficult subject to deal with, right? For example, I cannot convey, don't touch this bottle. Okay, it's my faith. I cannot prove why you should not touch it.
Yes, sir.
I cannot convince you otherwise also. Even if you touch, there is nothing I can do. But it is about my faith. So all these things are very, very sensitive to convey into the words or stories, right? But definitely people understand it only in the terms of their ideological lenses rather than how you are saying it. Okay. Yes. Any questions?
Sir, it's South Korea or something like that. They start to consider the age of the child even before the birth of the baby when the pregnancy is confirmed. What if it implemented that thing?
Age. It depends on cultural context also, right? It might add a lot of sensitivities. It might bring value. It might also bring a lot of complications. But the thing is, it's more about health of the baby, right? So if we have enough technology to help that baby, let's say he's born with some abnormality, the society is compassionate enough to never discriminate him. Or if the society is willing to support them, that's fine. Recently, you must have seen in the newspaper, there is a vaccine, there is a medicine, 16 crore rupees. So if the society is, having that compassion to provide 16 crore medicine for kids to survive, the parents may not think about abortion. but let's imagine a rickshaw puller, his wife is having that abnormality, right? The baby will be born with that, knowing very well that after being born, he will be a victim of his poverty. Sooner than later he has to die. Then what is the point? You get the idea, right? So the thing is, are we creating such ecosystem? If a child is born with autism, that is not the problem of the child. He should be taken care by the entire society. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a kid, right? So are we that global village? If yes, there can be solutions. If no, people think that not having a baby or abortion is the right decision. So the lot of things play a role. Anything else? Right. So I assume you keep reading ethics at least 1 hour per day, daily basis. So try to keep reading it. Definitely we'll start it as soon as possible, and we'll cover the important topics. Right. See you all tomorrow.